Great, thank you so much. It's a real privilege to be here. I'm Michelle Botha. I'm a research fellow at Stellenbosch University. I have a background in disability studies, in inclusive education, rehabilitation, and have also thought a bit about the importance of assistive devices. I have my own here with me. One is tech and one is animal. I'm thrilled to have an amazing panel to speak to today about this really important topic. People with disabilities are consumers too. I mean, what an important phrase. When we think about disability, we may not think about people with disabilities as active, as productive, and as consumers. And that is a historical legacy. It's a legacy in the media that we consume. It's in the way that we see or don't see people with disabilities in our communities. So I've got an amazing panel of scholars, of business leaders with me. I'm going to quickly introduce them. We have Philip Besimire, who's the CEO of Vodacom Tanzania. We have Mohali Ralibitso, the CEO of Vodacom Lesotho, and Dr. Del Ibrahim, who's a senior lecturer and occupational therapist at UCT. But I'm going to start with Karen Smith, who's the access lead at Vodacom, a very familiar face to the disabled community in Cape Town, probably South Africa as well, who's been driving accessibility in the digital sphere for many years. So Karen, I wanted to start by asking, again, this is not a topic we may think of often. So when we talk about accessibility, what is it that we mean? And what barriers do you encounter in your role as the access lead at Vodacom in promoting accessibility as something that needs to be embedded within the business?
Thanks a lot, Michelle. So when we talk about accessibility, we talk about including persons with disabilities. What accessibility is saying is that when we develop technology, processes, products, and services, we need to keep the needs of people with disabilities in mind. So we need to say what are the different disability segments: visually impaired, hearing impaired, physically disabled. How do we make sure that our consumers with disabilities can also adopt our products and services? Because most organizations, we are proud to say that we are diverse and inclusive. But when you look a little bit closer, you will find that it's not the case. In terms of, can persons with visual impairments access our website, our devices, does it have screen reader software, and so on. So it's really about responsible, equitable design. That is what it is. Whether it's online channels, whether it's physical in-store, we need to make sure that we accommodate persons with disabilities, because all of us has this 2030 agenda. And if we're not going to include people with disabilities, we're all going to report, hey, we achieved our targets. But yet, in the meantime, perhaps we've excluded persons with disabilities. Some barriers that I encounter is, or from an organizational level, is that often we treat accessibility as a project, Michelle. So we might get a customer complaint to say, I'm visually impaired, I cannot access your website, or I'm a deaf customer, you only have telephone numbers on your website. I cannot call. Where's the other channels, the text-based channels, like WhatsApp, SMS, and so on, video calling for sign language users. So I often see that organizations don't have a diverse range of even something as simple as a contact center for customers to contact them. Also, even when you go in store, I mean, any store, when you walk into a mall, when I need to walk far, I use a wheelchair. I don't use it permanently. And sometimes you get into the store, it's high seating, you know, I want to take out a contract, but the table is so high, it's not wheelchair accessible. So all of these simple things. And then when a customer perhaps complains, organization will step in and they will rectify that. But what that does, it's treated as a project. So let's quickly do it. There's a start and an end date, whereas accessibility should form part of an organization's culture and strategy. It's not a stop and a start project. Everything that we do in our organization, we should say, how does it impact our consumers with disabilities?
Yeah, that's so important, Karen. And you know what you're saying there about disability as a project, not as something that's embedded in the strategy. How do you suggest that businesses change that mindset and start looking at disability as part of their core strategy? I know this is something that your doctoral work focused on in a huge way. How can businesses embed disability and not just view it as a project, or oh no, something's gone wrong, we need to troubleshoot? Yeah.
I think businesses must be aware that we all, who's our consumers at the end of the day? It's society. Who's in society? It's diverse segments. It's business, it's youth, it's women, it's persons with disabilities, it's the elderly. So really get to know your segments and then start developing your products according to their needs. Do research, find out what their needs are. And a good place to start, Michelle, is to start with disability employment. So organizations can start employing people with disabilities, because by doing that, you also need to cater for their needs. You need to make the workplace accessible, and that then starts giving you confidence in terms of employing people with disabilities, and not just employing them, but actually having a career path and actually promoting them to all kinds of levels. Because believe me, there are excellent talent out there, people with disabilities. Yet, you know, and Adele will talk more about this, there's very high unemployment. So start with employing with people with disabilities, and start then with your leadership. That is very, very important. Leadership should buy in to diversity and inclusion, and not just buy in, but demonstrate that in the organization. It should be on the agenda of the board, of our monthly reports. It shouldn't just be something that we just do by the way. Oh, we're reporting to the Department of Labor, let's quickly just do a tick box exercise. No, it's really, leadership must be involved in disability inclusion as much as what they are involved in gender. And also I want to say that gender and LGBT plus and disability doesn't have to compete. They can run in parallel. But we find that disability somehow is always coming on there, right at the back somewhere. Disability is coming on. But personal leadership, and that we see today on this stage, Michelle. I'm so proud to have Mohali and Philip next to me, two CEOs that gladly volunteered to be here. Because, you know, when you talk about diversity and inclusion, and especially disability, research shows that CEOs are silent.
Yeah. So you've queued it up really well. This is going to be a great segue. Speaking of Philip, coming to you, from your perspective, in your context in Tanzania, what are some critical success factors in terms of the accessibility of your products and driving accessibility in your context?
Thank you. It feels like Karen set me up on this, but I'll take it. I think maybe just to build on just on where she ended with regards to CEOs owning this. My experience, and I think, and I must appreciate the work that Karen has done at Vodacom, because I think it was not until I started at Vodacom Tanzania that I got a lot of exposure into the work that she was doing, but also what that meant to me as a leader. And my biggest takeaway has been that actually inclusion is a leadership thing. If I don't lead this within the organization, it becomes a sideshow. So at least the first thing that we have done is in Tanzania is take up the inclusion as an agenda, as something that we all embrace within our various business units. And I take the lead on that, and we have inclusion and accessibility forums, which I chair, and we try and make sure that we have design inclusive thinking in everything that we do, whether we're doing products, whether we're doing new channels for our customers, whether we're rolling out devices. You know, it's something that must be catered for, because the opposite side of that is that you then come back after the fact to try and fix it, and it's not as easy to fix. So going back to the commitment, CEO commitment, I am a signatory to the GSMA digital inclusion principles, and that's a big commitment that I have taken as the CEO of Vodacom Tanzania, one of the few CEOs that has signed up to the GSMA digital inclusion principles, and that's because it's important to me, it's important to the organization in Tanzania. Further, thank you. Further, we have now, for example, obviously, history. We've now learned under correcting. More than 3/4 of our stores, we have been able to retrofit them, and now we have ramps on all these stores, so that at least people that need to access them using wheelchairs have just as easy access as it is as for the people that would normally like other people. The other third of stores that's remaining, our commitment has been that we'll try and make sure they are completed, by the end of March 2025. We've also introduced video calling into our call center, so that the deaf can at least get assistance with sign language when they use our video calling channels into our call centers. Something else that we're working on that's quite exciting, and I'm actually proud to be part of this initiative with one of our agile squads, is embedding voice recognition into our smart apps, so that people, because it's again, I think Karen made the point. We design, let's say, and build all these apps, and we think about people that, can see, can read, and we don't think about other customers that actually don't, have disabilities such as this. So we're building a voice recognition feature into our app, especially because mobile financial services is big in Tanzania. And we want our customers that are blind to also be able to use our app. And I'm very excited about that. I think it will be a first large use case product or initiative in our region. And I'll be keen to really take that to market as soon as it's ready. Beyond that, maybe just in summary, even in our social programs, we have actually made sure that we have initiatives that are specific and targeted towards communities that have disabilities at varying degrees. Because what we found was that previously it was just, we sprinkled a little bit and gave a little bit here, a little bit there, but it was never deliberate. So in our Vodacom Foundation, it's now one of our work streams, and we are deliberate about having inclusive programs on an ongoing basis, as opposed to a transactional approach. So I think, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that we've tried to embed this into the way we work and make sure that it's not a sideshow, but it's part of our day-to-day ways of doing business in Tanzania.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for those really practical examples as well. And I think a little soundbite from what you've just said, which just sits with me, is inclusion is a leadership thing. I think we could actually just take that as a little takeaway. What have been some lessons that you've learned? I mean, it sounds like you've learned an awful lot about these very practical ways of inclusion. But as you've gone on this journey of embedding inclusion, what have been some lessons learned for you?
Firstly, it's not easy because it's not, and it's until you work and live with people that have disabilities that actually realize how excluded they have been for so long. Karen does mention just a simple example, how people access the building. This is something you never think about because, you know, maybe you can walk or you can get into the store and the counters are within reach and so on. We've employed, for example, some folks with disabilities, and all of a sudden they get to the entrance of the building and they're stuck. Now you must get people to help carry up the wheelchair, or when they get to the store, the attendant must come round because now they can't reach. So I think just being deliberate and making sure we get people into the process, get people into employment, talk with these folks, you actually get to, I find that we've learned more and a lot more clearer on what we try and solve for. We have, for example, twice a year, we've now started, we started this last year, we have a forum with people with disabilities, and it's so humbling when I have about 50 plus people in a room, and many of them are blind, deaf, and others are using wheelchairs, and the things you take for granted, like you're speaking and you must pause so that there is either the people that are doing that, and now in Tanzania, by the way, more interestingly, because we speak Swahili mostly. Now you've got somebody doing sign language, and they're trying in their head to translate from English to Swahili, so they can then do the sign language for the people that for the deaf. So it's just being part and parcel and present in these spaces and embracing folks that have got disabilities, whether it's in the workplace, in the way we design our products. That's, for me, has been my biggest lesson so far.
Thank you. Mahali, coming to you, a similar question to Philip, from the Lesotho context, tell us a little bit about efforts towards accessibility in your context.
Thank you. Let me start, if I may, with a digression and an ask of the audience to reach out to the people who are not in the room, because it speaks to our priorities as societies, and to the organizers to suggest that for next year, short of making this a compulsory platform for people to engage in, that something needs to change, because the very reason our sector matters is that we can apply technology to produce better societal outcomes. If, when we are talking about challenges such as catering for people with impairments or disabilities as customers, we're in the minority. We already have it in the workplace that people with disabilities or impairments with regularity file minority reports. A good many of us who are here will be aware that the late, great Nelson Mandela was just down the road involuntarily and made the great sacrifice of opening up so many possibilities for the world and not just. And that lesson, I think, is an important one for us, at least for as long as this conference is here, to say that we should do the difficult things and focus our attention on driving innovation there, because any one of us who are sitting in the audience now who are fully abled, something could happen, and tomorrow, even if it's for a period of time, there will be assistive technologies that will get you through that. which were it not for the advocacy of people living with disabilities would not be available to them. So I think we need to shift our lenses a little bit in terms of what we prioritize.
Very true. Very true.
Thank you. And Philip has spoken already to a number of the initiatives that we are busy with inside of the Vodacom group, and a substantial part of which is credit to Dr. Karen Smith and her activism in ensuring that inclusivity is an agenda that lives inside of the organization in totality. And so, Dr. Smith, thank you for that. And it also speaks to the fact that involvement requires leadership, and our job as leaders is to look through the apex and to do the difficult things and not just the things that we do quarter on quarter in order to meet our financial targets. And I think it goes back to that basic thing of saying, looking at things through the lens of the customer. How many of you have been to, I think there's a young lady in the audience who's been to a perfume shop, people have been to car dealerships, all manner of places where for whatever reason you were discounted and not factored in as a presence that has the ability to purchase anything. Let's all go back to that segment of one feeling of what it's like to be excluded. And from that perspective, think clearly about what we ought to be doing as a society, especially now because the means to design from the start, as Rian was coaching me, are there for us to get things right at the front rather than as a retrofit. If we take that integrative and inclusive thinking up front, it'll open up possibilities which will benefit not just people with disabilities or impairments, temporary or permanent, but all of us at beyond, and simplify our ability to use technology to achieve whatever our life goals may be. I hope I haven't digressed too far and strayed from the question and issues at hand.
No, I think what you've brought in is so important because it's not how we look at disability. I think you know what you're bringing to the table is not a them issue. It's a human issue. It's an us issue. It's a humanity. It's a question of humanity and our shared humanity, rather than those people over there that need something special. And I think that's so crucial. And it speaks to the mind shift. It speaks to the mind shift that has to happen in order for inclusion to be driven, for accessibility to become embedded. I wanted to ask you as well about the inaugural Vodacom Accessibility Conference, which you attended recently. And if you could just share any of your learnings from that conference.
Thank you. It was an amazing conference because once more we get back to that basic of, it was led by people living with disabilities. They shone a light on the areas that are going well, which we need to build upon. And it wasn't the abled talking about the differently abled. It was a collective dialogue, and it wasn't a government platform, because oftentimes inclusion becomes a subject of either legislation or regulation rather than a voluntary thing, which we do because we want to leave the world a better place than we found it. We learned a lot, we reflected a lot about what we still have to do, and it was beautiful that coming out of that event, we would later present 3 computer labs to schools at primary and high school level in Lesotho with assistive devices, which will allow for us to have people being educated and having things which I think some schools are able to take for granted. All of us who are in the room at some point or another, well, I think all of us as a constant have had to go through schools and what have you. And unless we start thinking carefully about what it takes, it means that we are going to exclude some young people who are going to be the Karens of tomorrow, the Stephen Hawkings and others, and that we have to make that investment. Otherwise, we're really going to miss out on some amazing people and enable us for the entirety of society. So that forum was absolutely pivotal for us, crystallizing our commitment to being an inclusive organization, not on a compliance basis as Karen was describing, because in the main, as business, we're not that great at compliance. We're great at applying resources to achieve outcomes. We just have to make sure that our focus is on the totality of outcomes that can be achieved with technology as an enabler for us to have a better society. We face many challenges which we haven't resolved as humanity. The answers surely require that all of us participate in the discourse and into the investment into making sure that we tackle at least the known problems that we face the world over.
Yeah. Thank you. That's so helpful. There's so much to digest there. Adele, I want to come to you because you bring a perspective in here as an occupational therapist, as someone who's worked for many years with people with disabilities, particularly around the issue of access to employment. And it's come up, across the panel, the enabling potential of assistive devices, of accessible technology. Talk to us a little bit about the connection between accessible tech and entrance into employment for people with disabilities.
Thanks, Michelle. I think we need to go back to what Mohali has said around education, right? To get a job, you need to have an education of some sort. And in our context, many young people have been denied that opportunity to access education because they don't have the ability to access the curriculum that is offered. So through assistive devices, our young people can then get engaged with education, get to know what's going on out there. And then getting into kind of legislative landscapes. A lot of our legislation has been supporting inclusive education, development of young people. But once they get to the employment point, suddenly things fall flat. Suddenly there's nowhere for them to go. And if we look at the numbers, and particularly in Africa at the moment, 9 out of 10 people who are eligible to be employed, who have disabilities, are not. There's about a 90% unemployment rate in Africa, 100% when we go into the rural areas. And to me, that's shocking. There are people who are well qualified, who have reached the pinnacle of education even, but are still not able to find jobs. And so that leaves me with the question of why? Where's the barrier? And yes, we can talk for days around infrastructure barriers and not being able to get into a building, or not being able to get to the job because there's no transport. But for me, I think it extends beyond that. Because often when you speak to employers, you are faced with a barrier, and it's not necessarily an infrastructure barrier, it's a mindset barrier. And recently I've been doing a lot of reading, a lot of talking, and the buzzwords at the moment is around this growth mindset, right? We are going to be innovative, we're going to have a growth mindset, we're going to manage our talent. But when you put a person with a disability there, suddenly there's this barrier, there's this block, no one knows where to go. It's kind of like a stop street. And I'm like, but if we are implementing a growth mindset and we're managing talent, why is it so difficult? Why is there a snag list as long as the highway? There's always a but, yes, but. And even when you tender a solution, there's always a but. And to me, that's around a growth mindset. And so I'm very inspired as I'm sitting here with Philip and Mohali, because I can see that there's a change in mindset, that there's a growth opportunity here to employ people with disabilities. Remembering that everyone is part of economy, right, in one way or another. So are persons with disabilities. And if we are not going to open our economies to be inclusive, we're not going to employ persons with disabilities to be productive and engage with our economy and grow our economy, what's going to happen to them? There's a large part of the market that I think businesses are missing because they're not considering persons with disabilities as consumers, right? On the other side of that, in order for someone to be a healthy consumer, they need to have a job, right? So by employing persons with disabilities, we are strengthening our economies, we are creating more consumers. And for me, that seems pretty simple. But for me, it's about a mindset change that needs to happen.
Yeah, and stealing Philip's wonderful soundbite again, inclusion is a leadership thing. What's the role of senior leadership here?
For me, it is vital. If the leader is not buying in, no one is going to change the culture, the climate of that organization. I've seen it over and over in my work. If the leader can understand, if the leader is willing to be visionary, to be innovative, to be creative, and to not look at the snag list as impossible, I think doors can be opened very quickly and very widely. I think leaders pave the way for their subsidiaries or subordinates or whatever you'd like to call them to do the difficult things as we've heard. Often you'll find that there are persons with disabilities going into HR managers' offices, and because that HR manager doesn't have an understanding, perhaps, that's exactly where the journey stops. But if the leader or the CEO of that company has mandated that this is how we're going to operate, this is our culture, this is our climate, that will filter down to the rest. And eventually that person at the HR desk will understand.
Thank you so much to our panel. I could really speak to you all day, but I won't. I wanted to just close with some thoughts. I think there are two things behind what's come through in what all of you have said. Almost two cases for disability, and some of these will be familiar, especially to this panel. The one is there is the business case for people with disabilities, for including people with disabilities, for employing people with disabilities. As Adele's just said, there's a slice of the market that's being missed. If we don't view people with disabilities as consumers, as having buying power, and if we don't employ people with disabilities so that they're part of the economy, we miss a massive group of brilliant people. So there is that business case. But next to that and alongside that is the human case, I think, for inclusion. And as I said earlier, it's not a them thing, it's an us thing, it's a humanity thing. Disability does not discriminate, and we will all enter the disability family at some point, or someone we love will. And so, as Mohali so rightly said earlier, there is the activism and advocacy of people like Karen, who has paved the way for all of us, and for people who will be joining the family of disabled people in the future. I said this recently at an event I went to. I think it made people a little bit uncomfortable, but I said when disability becomes part of your life, and it's not an if, it's a when, our community will be here, and we will welcome you into our community. And the assistive tech that advocates like Karen have worked to bring into the mainstream will be here to assist you. And so I just want to thank the panel. Please talk to them. There's so many lessons and so much wisdom from Philip and Mohali on their journeys, from Karen. I think there's so much more to learn. So please, on their behalves, I'm saying, find them and connect with them and speak to them about their journeys to promoting accessibility. Thank you, everybody.
Michelle, sorry, before you go, can I just jump in here? Thank you so much for that. We said we're just going to be having this nice conversation, but I just realized we didn't really talk about figures. So globally, there's 1.3 billion people with disabilities. In Africa, 10%, you're looking at 140 million people with disabilities. Just in South Africa, 6 to 10 million. And disability is really part of human nature. A lot of us, or a lot of our colleagues were in accidents. If you look at the wars going on currently globally, can you just imagine how the stats for people with disabilities is increasing because of our unstable, the political things going on in the world. What I liked, I just want to emphasize this, what Philip and Mohali said. It's not about talking about people with disabilities, but it's about, Michelle, we on this panel, we are people with disabilities, but it's about talking with people with disabilities. And that's why I'm so proud of Vodacom, that we're putting this on the agenda, and that we really say, how can tech be an enabler to increase the quality of life for people with disabilities? So I just want to make this one statement. If I were to say to you, or if I was a magician and I could make your cell phone, a lot of you are currently on your cell phones, maybe you are making notes. If I could make your cell phone disappear and your laptop, Just think about that for a moment. You go from empowered, you go from included, isn't it, Michelle, to excluded, to disempowered. You can't do your internet banking, you cannot call your loved one, you are stuck. That's what happens to people with disabilities when you deny them opportunities. So I just wanted to emphasize that as a summary, Michelle,
So
listening
important.
to everybody here. And to Philip and to Mohali, you know, sticking up their hands saying, let me come here and sit on this global stage and talk about disability, because you won't find this a lot. So, and even not just today, but in our organization, when we've got internal awareness webinars, all our CEOs are always willing to be part of the conversation, Michelle, because often as humans, when we see somebody that's different to us, what do? We try and avoid them. We don't make eye contact. Don't look at them. You won't get my disease, I promise you. You know?
Dr. Botha, if I may,
Yes.
and to latch on to what Dr. Smith has spoken to in terms of the 1 point some odd billion people, and for the fact that we have a number of technology partners here, maybe we should have it as an end goal that for every X number of devices which are manufactured, we should have a percentage of those which are subsidized so that assistive devices stop being so expensive. In the absence, thank you.
Yeah.
In the absence of a Vodacom and other entities that have made contributions towards ensuring that we get young people through the schooling system with access to these technologies and into the workplaces, we need more so that it's a default setting that these technologies are available, precisely so that people who are living with disabilities or who become impaired later in life have the very technologies that allow for them to lead productive lives, to be consumers, and to help solve the many challenges that we still face in the world. And perhaps that's something that we can put on the agenda to become a global goal, from manufacturing to software to you name it. Because the more we do it, the cheaper it's going to be to provide those. And until such time that we make it put some scale behind that, it's going to continue to be that on economic criteria, we continue to exclude people.
Yeah.
Wonderful suggestion. Thank you, Mohali. Thank you. So we want to give this audience a challenge today, because we don't want you just to sit here and listen. I know a lot of you are tired. You've sat here the whole morning. But hopefully something within you changed. Because at the end of the day, a lot of times we are so business-like. You know, we forget that technology is an enabler to humanity, to make things better for everybody. So for you to go back to your business and to say, you know what, let's ask the question, what do we do for employing people with disabilities? And if we employ them, is it now just they sit there for 20 years in the same position, or do they have a career path and they go into senior management? So that's another topic. Disabled people in senior management is almost zero. Even if you are a star performer, it happens very difficult. So to go back and challenge your HR, challenge your CEO. This is Disability Month in South Africa. It's Disability Awareness Month. And on the 3rd of December, it's International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Go back to your organization, ask them, what are you doing? It's called Celebrate Disability Month. So what are we as an organization doing for employing people with disabilities, but also advancing them? What are we doing, Michelle, for our customers with disabilities? And I wish we had a long French loaf and a bottle of red wine. And we would have sat here till tonight. I don't think the audience will be too happy, though. But really to go back and say, we've got customers. Can visually impaired people like Michelle, using screen reader software, access our website? So she wants to order your product. She's a senior lecturer at a university. She's educated. She earns money. We earn money. We want to buy
not
by
enough.
you. We want to purchase your products, man. Please include us.
Karen, I'm going to let you have the last word. And she says she's going to retire in a few years. Doubtful. Very
Make us
doubtful,
part,
my
make
friends.
us part of your brand. Make us part of your brand. And I'm ending. Thank
Okay.
you.
Karen, you have the last word. Thank you, panel. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.